So now, says the Alshich, coming back to the Alshich, I didn't forget about him. He says, if you look carefully at everything that Yosef did, he did it all for one reason, and for one reason alone. He did it to do things measure for the brothers to see the mistake that they did. They did a terrible, terrible avera that till today we suffer from. The fact that they sold their brother Yosef with all the religious calculations. They thought they knew that every patriarch had a bad apple in the bunch. Avram had a Yishmael, and Yitzchak had an Esav, and they figured Yaakov would have to have one bad apple too. And the way Yosef is comporting himself, as we mentioned last week, he's dressing himself up by fixing up his hair, and he thinks he's the king, and all these things that are going on, and much deeper things. And they mistakenly thought he's a wicked guy. And they said, you know what? We can't afford for this to happen. We're going to have to take him out. We're going to have to take him out. And if you look carefully, you're going to see that this is a big mistake. And who knew it better than anybody else? Yosef knew it better than anybody else. Because Yosef, deep, we know he was the ultimate tzaddik. Now, again, you'll see in a minute. I'm sure you're going to ask a question, but we'll obviate that question that's coming up. You're going to say, well, can't I do things to people, measure for measure, to get them to think about it? No. But Yosef was a tzaddik. Yosef knew they did a terrible crime. Selling him was the worst thing they could do. And we are told that I'll leave that for later. So now, he is languishing in Egypt. Now, and he understands, I must have done something wrong too, because I wouldn't be sitting here in jail for 12 years if I didn't do something wrong. And I got to do tshuva, and he was very sensitive to this issue, because that's what the Rashi says. There were 3 things he did wrong. And Hashem showed him, and he learned from those mistakes. And he changed a lot, as we mentioned in last week's class. He changed a lot. He got the messages. So you can imagine a guy who suffered. He suffered a lot. He suffered 12 years till he can get the messages. Now, you put your faith in somebody else, sit another 2 years. Why didn't the guy tell me why didn't the butler tell Paro already? What's going on? You put too much trust in him. You got to learn to only have trust in Hashem. Fine, another suffering. But he takes it all in. He understands it. He learns. So someone who's gone through the process and learns, he could see it clearer in others who haven't been learning. So therefore, everything he does is measure for measure to the precise detail. Why? So that the brothers could come to the realization themselves that they did a terrible thing. So for example, he gives 5 examples. I'll briefly go through them. Number 1, they hated him, they were hostile, and more importantly, it says they couldn't speak peacefully with him. That's the pasuk says. They couldn't speak with him peacefully. They weren't even, the arguments got to the point where they weren't even speaking menschlich to them. Now, of course, it all starts with religious reasons. You know, Yosef is a danger to the family. He'll destroy the family. Can you imagine what would happen if Esav would have got the blessings and only at the very last minute were they taken away? And Yosef's just as conniving and even more tricky than Esav. Can you imagine what's going to happen? We got to get rid of him. But there's a lot of things they were doing wrong. Still, they weren't speaking nicely to him. So because they weren't speaking nicely to him, so what's the measure for measure? When they now come to this stranger, Sofnas Paneach, the viceroy of Egypt, what do you do? The Torah specifically says he spoke harshly to them. Why? Accusing them of being spies. So they should start saying, oh, that's funny. The 50 people in line before us, he didn't say anything to them. And us, he's making a big deal. He's accusing us of being spies, and he's yelling and screaming at us. Why is God doing that to us? What did we do in our lives? When did we speak so harshly to somebody in our lives? Yosef wants them to get the message. They planned on killing him. They really planned on killing him. The Medrash says when Yosef came to see them in Shem, they sent wild dogs to kill him. And another Medrash says they shot arrows at him to kill him. But God wouldn't let that happen. Right? So wanted to kill him. So now Yosef has to bring in a measure for measure and says, listen, I accuse you of being spies. Because a spy, just like a spy tries to figure out which way to dispose of the enemy in the best way fashion, which spies are there to kill people. So I'm accusing you of being spies. I'm accusing you of being killers. Why would you accuse us of being killers? Maybe because we are killers. And if you notice the discussion between Reuven and the brothers, it's very interesting. Very interesting. And you can see how it sometimes, when you even try to figure out the measure for measure, you can make a mistake. And the brothers do, to a certain degree, try to understand the measure for measure. Because when Yosef accuses them of being spies, and he says, you better bring back Binyamin, and if you don't bring back Binyamin, I will say that you are spies. And he says, if you bring him back, you will live. So then the brothers go off to the side to talk it over amongst themselves. He says, oh, we're guilty. We're guilty. We saw the suffering of our brother, and we didn't respond to the suffering of our brother. And then what it says, Vaya'an. Let me find it over here. One second. I'm going to read it inside. It's so important to read this. Where is this? Vaya'an Reuven Osam. Perik Mem Beis Pasuk Al Beis. And Reuven answered them, saying, didn't I tell you don't sin against the boy? And didn't listen, and now he seeks his blood? So the question is, what's Vaya'an? Vaya'an means he answered. Usually you answer when somebody asks you a question. Nobody asked him a question. The verse before says, each brother said to him, oh, I guess we're guilty over our brother. We saw his pain when he was pleading for us and we didn't listen. Therefore this suffering has come to us. Why does the next verse say, and Reuven answered, as if they were asking him a question. Where's asking him a question? So the commentaries answer, because brother said, why is this guy chappering us? Why is he bothering us? Why is he making us miserable? Oh, I know why. You know what? When we sold Yosef, we were right in selling him. That's for sure we're right. But you know what the problem was? Reuven, you told us to throw him in the pit. Remember? He told us to throw him in the pit? And that scared the living daylights out of him. And then we took him out and then we sold him. So for selling him, that was fine. But God is punishing us for throwing him in the pit, because that we shouldn't have done. The fact you wanted to kill him, you didn't think about that. The fact you saw him, you don't think about that. But we gave him a little more cruel punishment. We threw him in the pit and he was screaming for his life. And we just said, so since we were acting so cruelly, and that one little point, so this guy's making cruel for us, which now turns a finger to Reuven. And who told us to throw him into the pit? You, Reuven. If we wouldn't have said anything, we would have just sold him, we wouldn't have any problems. See how they're misreading the whole story? So now Vaya'an Reuven. So Reuven has to answer, because they're accusing him. He answers, and he says, didn't I tell you not to sin against the boy? Now he really didn't, but that was his plan. Remember, he went from the pit to take him out later, right? But here's the point. It says, V'gam damo hineni drush. But now his blood is being asked for. Because Yosef says, if you want to come back and live, you bring back Binyamin, which implied if you don't, you'll die. Don't you guys hear what he's saying? He says he wants to kill us. So he must have done something wrong about wanting to kill Yosef. And to that, the brothers don't respond and they don't agree. So you can see how even when you're trying to come up with a midah, somehow you can't believe you're that bad. Okay, I'll agree that I wasn't so nice. What do you mean you're not so nice? You tried to kill the guy. Well, I wasn't so nice that I threw him in the pit. That was maybe, a little excessive force. We just would have sold him, that would have been fine. And more than that, what Reuven was saying is, and don't you think selling him to Egypt isn't like killing him? You sell him to Egypt. This is not like, there's like no Jews in Egypt. He will live like a non-Jew. You're killing his neshama. The Gemara says it's worse to kill a person's neshama than to kill his body. So that's what Reuven is saying, but that is not carrying the day, because the brothers, God forbid, did anything that terrible. So that's a big pitfall, and even if you think there's an operation of measure for measure, you don't want to think the worst. Anyway, Yosef continues. That was only the second thing. The third thing is they threw him in a, what do they call it? In a pit. Now a pit was called a bore. Now what does he do to them after he accuses them of being spies? He throws them in the bore. He throws them in jail, because the jails were pits. They were underground. He throws all the brothers in a pit. Is it registering? And then he lets them out, but then he still throws who? Reuven, who's the, rather Shimon, who's the one who was really the top brother who wanted to kill Yosef. Who was the one who threw Yosef in the pit? It was Shimon. And then when Yosef sends all the brothers back, he keeps one in jail. Who? Shimon. Huh? Maybe you get what's going on, guys? No. You sold me for money. You sold me. They got a little money out of the deal. They got 20 coins for selling Yosef. So you sold for money, which is it's really like stealing. When you sell something for money, it's like stealing, right? So what happens? He puts the money back in their sacks because they will now think they're going to be accused of stealing. So I'm setting up a situation where you be accused of stealing. Maybe there's something wrong about stealing. And then they gave Yaakov a very bitter cup to drink. When they say, do you recognize this coat of your son? So he gives them a bitter cup right back. He puts the cup into Benjamin's sack. So he's doing all these things, everything he's doing. And because they understand, if he says, hi, I'm Yosef, then he can't do any of this. Under the covert operations of being the viceroy of Egypt, he's able to bring all these calamities to them, and it's exactly measured, precisely, measure for measure for the brothers. Why? To bring a certain atonement. He wants them to come to the recognition. So now the question is, so wait a minute, is Yosef playing God? And he decides if he should, what kind of atonements they need? Which is a very good question. So what's the answer? That's what the Ramban is answering. That's what the Ramban is answering. Ramban says, why didn't he tell them? He says, well, because he had these dreams. Meaning to say, because had he not had the dreams, he never would have taken that on himself. But once he had the dreams, he understood that, and especially after he gets out of the jail through dreams, he understands that God has put me in the position that I have to show them what they've done wrong. And that's what it means when it says he saw the brothers and he remembered the dreams. I remember the dreams because I have a job now. I have to correct their mistakes. If they're gonna have to come down and bow down to me, what does that really mean to come down to me? To say you were better than us. We were wrong, you were right. And only because of the dreams did he realize that God put this job upon him. Right? So very interesting. So try to picture what's going on over here. So remember, you gotta take yourself out of the reading the headlines in the paper. You know, just like in the newspapers. You know, like it's not enough that they say, the golfer got smashed into his thing and there's a problem. They say, no, we got to know what the real story is, which is totally not correct. But when you're going through the Torah, you got to know God wants you to know what the real story is, because that's how we're going to really learn the real messages over here. So okay, it's facts. The brothers, they sold him, it's fact. Now let's put some emotion into this. Okay, let's say you're Yosef. Now, how does the story feel now? So picture the family. There's constant strife with each other, right? Now, they knew Yosef well. He was with them for 17 years. Okay, imagine your brother with somebody, for your sister for somebody, 17 years. And it wasn't like they went to university for half the time you didn't see them. You were in close quarters for 17 years, right? And in this parsha, wouldn't you think that once they would think that the person they're dealing with is Yosef? Wouldn't you think once to say, hey, maybe this guy's Yosef? And Rashi deals with this problem in the fourth source, but he deals with it in a very simple way. It says he recognized them, but they didn't recognize him. Why? Because when he left, he was 17. He didn't have a beard yet. Now he grew a beard. But they already were older than them. They already had beards. So he could recognize them, but they couldn't recognize him. Well, occasionally I have people come up to me, they have beards, and they say, Rabbi, do you recognize me? I'm looking. He says, yeah, in grade 1. Remember 24 years ago, grade 1? I said, I'm trying to. Some kids I can recognize, but once they got the beard already, then it's really hard to try to figure it out. So Rashi gets out of it. He says, well, I guess he had a beard. He had a beard they couldn't tell. But that can't be the whole reason. To not recognize a real brother to not look in the eyes, not to see the expressions. Once you hear a person talk already, you can start to, there's certain mannerism. I could tell people, looking at this one, when they're walking, I know who it is. There's certain people who have a certain kind of a gait to them that's unique. Not bad, not good. It's just, you get, oh, that's so-and-so. So some people, they lean more to the right. They have they saunter as opposed to walking. Whatever. You can even tell by walking. But the mannerisms, everything, and not to think that maybe he's the brother. Yossi does so many things to practically give himself away. And they don't seem to catch any of it. It's very strange. When he accused, the midrashim are, so many midrashim here are filling in the gaps. They're looking at Safnas Paneach, yeah? And he accused them of being spies. And they said, we were peaceful people. Then all of a sudden he says, yeah, really, then how is it that the two of you killed out a whole city of Shechem? Now, it wasn't like they had, telegraphic agencies in those days where all the news went all the way. Egypt's clear, for our intents and purposes, is the other side of the world. Right? So, how did you know that? He put Shimon in jail more than anyone else. Shimon isn't exactly the ringleader of the brothers in front of him. Doesn't that click at all? Then in the second encounter, he has them sit at the table, and he has them sit in order of their spiritual qualities. You're going to be at the head, you're going to be next, and it's exactly the way they were spiritually. And when Yehuda petitions to take Binyamin's place in next week's parsha, Yosef says, and where were you to take the place when your brother was sold? Who knew about that? They did that in a private pit, and they swore each one to secrecy, that nobody could tell. Yaakov didn't know. Yitzchak, who was alive, didn't know. Nobody knew. And here's Safnas Paneach knows that we sold our brother? Why is he asking so many personal questions about their father? Tell me about your father. Can you imagine if you would go to one of government agencies to get your passport? You're picking up your, let's say I go to pick up my landed immigrant card. Can you imagine I go wait in line, everybody's going to come to me. So tell me about your father. Where's your father? How's your father doing? How many kids you have? What is this? So, well, excuse me? I think you're a spy. Right? So why ask so many questions about the father? And right before he reveals himself, the fifth source, the Medrash, what goes on? He says to the brothers after Yehuda says, listen, I'll take the place of Binyamin. He says, I bought your brother as a slave. He says it to them. He says, really? Yeah. He says, and then he says, and I'll call him. Joseph. Yosef. Brother's still, where is he? Nobody's coming in the room. His mom is hitting you over the head with this. And they still can't even for a minute think that that's Yosef. When Yosef sent one of his guards to take him over to the jail, it was a big problem. When Yosef wanted to put the brother Shimon in jail, he sends a few Egyptian guards, and Shimon's strong. He just throws them off. Nobody can, because the brothers are all incredibly strong. Yaakov and his children were incredibly strong. A regular Egyptian can't do anything. The 5-6 soldiers can't do nothing. So Safnas Paneach says, let my son take him. Another Egyptian. All of a sudden Menashe comes. He takes Shimon. Boom. Puts him in the jail. He says, look, what kind of strength? This is only the kind of strength you find in the house of Yaakov. And they still don't get it. They just don't get it the whole time. What's going on over here? So the Alshach says there's one principle to learn from this story. When there's so much jealousy and so much hatred, the power of jealousy and hatred is so great that the truth can stare you right in the face and you won't be able to recognize it. A person can create so many barriers to the truth by virtue of the jealousy and hatred that's within a person, that the truth can be staring you in the face and he won't admit it, won't recognize it, and won't see it. And when Yosef's brothers came down to Mitzrayim, what bothered Yosef more than anything else was not so much that they sold him into slavery, because he really could accept that. All right, they made a big mistake, but what bothered Yosef more than anything else is, why can't you guys recognize your own brother in front of your face? I'm dropping hints left and right. I'm doing things so measured for measure, it's uncanny, as if to say, wake up, see who's in front of you. And they don't realize it. So the whole point, Yosef is waiting for what purpose? Why is he doing this? Because he's looking for them to have self-realization. He's waiting for them to work out their own shortcomings of jealousy and hatred that had become embedded in them for years. That they should be able to regret their past to the point where they themselves could be able to recognize Yosef. And that really became the litmus test. If they can't recognize Yosef, that means they haven't taken care of the past. Because there's no way a sane person with a half a mind, and these were very clever brothers, couldn't recognize that Yosef was right in front of them. But you understand, they had a whole, they had a whole posture for Yosef. They said, Yosef is wicked, Yosef is this, Yosef is that, he's heinous, he's this, and all these terrible things. Right? And he'll never amount to anything good. And now you're looking at a man who's so powerful right in front of you, and you can't believe that this is Yosef. Right? That's how embedded they are in the jealousy and the hatred. They can see no good in Yosef ever amounting to anything. So what the problem's like this. So Yosef certainly would have been very happy to say, listen, I'm Yosef. Long ago. But what would that mean? That means they haven't worked on their behavior. They haven't worked on the barriers. And the barrier is still a barrier. Because if I just come forth, I could tell them I'm Yosef. It doesn't make a difference to me. It doesn't make a difference. I can tell them right away that I'm Yosef. So if I keep playing along and I keep dealing with them measure for measure, hopefully they're going to start digging deeper into themselves. And they realize, why is God still doing this? It must be we've done something much worse than we think we did. And maybe they'd come to realize, maybe it was our jealousy of Yosef that got us to do what we did. And maybe we were totally wrong. And then they would finally, and he would know. You know how he would know everything. Remember, Yosef pretended he was an Egyptian, right? So he spoke Egyptian. He used his son as the interpreter to interpret from Egyptian to Hebrew, who then said it to the brothers, and then the brothers gave it back. And therefore, many times the brothers were speaking on the side in Hebrew, when they knew the interpreter wasn't there. They didn't care what was in front of Yosef, because they knew that he didn't understand them. So he always having a running, it was like having a, a bug in the room, listening to them. So he knew everything was going on. He knew the first time when they're saying, well, maybe they didn't say, yeah, it was your fault, Reuben, really, we didn't do anything wrong. So he knows all the time if they're going to do tshuva or not. As soon as they're going to do tshuva, he'd know it, they'd recognize him. But they're not recognizing him. So he says, I'm going to have to hold back as much as, and you don't think he wanted, it says the second time when Binyamin was brought, that was his brother Binyamin, his full brother who he loved so much. And when he asked his brother, tell me about your children, he says, I have 10 children. Tell me their names. And each name of the child reflected an aspect of lamentation that he had over losing Yosef. Can you imagine hearing your 10 nephews have names relating to the fact that about Yosef who's dead? Can you imagine? And the Torah says his emotion was inside. He couldn't control himself. He wanted to tell us. He wanted to hug Binyamin. He wants, I'm your brother, I'm your brother, I'm your brother. But he says, I can't, because I have to let them come to realize their mistake on their own. If they will understand the mistake on their own, that means they will have cleared up their problem. So you have to really be a leader to do that, you see. A leader doesn't say, well, no, I can't take it anymore. I have to give in. I have to say hello to them. A leader has to be tough. And that's what Yosef was. So now, what happens? Finally, we come to the end of the parsha. They go, and we end in a very, don't know where things happen. We're not going to have a class next week, so I got to tell you how it turns out. Right? So what's going to happen is, and then Yehuda comes and he pleads the case. But then already he starts upping the ante, and he says, and if you don't return Binyamin, we're going to go to war. And the brothers start showing what kind of strength they have. And he says, and Yosef says, it's getting to the point where this is not good anymore. And he's trying the last minute. I sold your brother. I bought your brother. Here he is, Yosef, and they're still not getting it. So finally, he had to tell them. He had to tell them who they were. So he finally reveals himself. And at the moment he reveals himself, what happens? The brothers faint. They can't talk. They're speechless for a moment. What does that mean? It means had they worked it out on their own, and had they worked through the jealousy and the hatred and come to realize their mistake and realize the uniqueness of who Yosef was, that would have meant they would have elevated themselves from their earlier situation, and then they probably could have handled it if they would have heard that Yosef was alive. But being that they stayed behind the barriers of hatred and jealousy, and they still think Yosef is a criminal trying to undermine their part of the family, as long as they're thinking that way, and all at once they come to realize that they couldn't even recognize their brother was in front of them. So then all the dichotomy comes crashing in. He's so wicked, he's so terrible. So that, what? He's the viceroy of Egypt? He's saving our lives? And he's so righteous? Boom! They can't handle that. It was at that point when he reveals it was undeniable he was the leader. And that hatred and that jealousy was really unfounded. So they fainted. Then we come to one of the biggest killjoy Rashis in the world. We'll end with this Rashi. It says, then finally he reveals himself to the brothers, he talks to them, this and that. And then it says, and he and Binyamin have a big hug. And where's it which Rashi is this? From the Midrash, number 6. It says, and he fell upon his brother Benjamin's neck, in the plural. Now, since when does a person have more than one neck? So did Benjamin then have 2 necks? In fact, said Rabbi Lazar, he foresaw through the Holy Spirit that 2 temples would be built in Benjamin's portion, and both would be destroyed. We know the temple is an analogy. The temple is a neck. Why? A neck combines the head and the lower part of the body. The neck is a very critical juncture, because the head is the spiritual part of the person, and the below is the physical. So the temple is what would bound up the physical and spiritual world. So a neck is analogous to the temples. So he saw in a future prophetic vision that the temple, which 2 temples that stood in Benjamin's portion of land, would be destroyed. And Benjamin cried on one neck of Yosef because the tabernacle, before the temple was built, the tabernacle was in Shiloh, which was in the tribe of Yosef's portion, would be destroyed as well. So what kind of killjoy Rashi is this? They finally see each other after 22 years. And what are they? They're crying. You figure it's tears of joy. No, it's tears of future suffering. What kind of Rashi is that? What's going on over here? The answer is when they cried, they knew that they were crying for a hatred and a disunity that had not been dealt with. They understood that as happy as things may appear, it's not good at all. The brothers still, they've been shown they're wrong, but they don't admit it. If Yosef has to come to the point to reveal himself, and the brothers don't come to the realization on their own, so Yosef and Binyamin both realize, although now it seems to be a happy reunion, but the internal hatred has not been worked out, the barriers had not really been broken, so Yosef could predict that future hatred and disunity would rear its ugly head later on in Jewish history. There would always be a tremendous animosity between the family of Yosef and the rest of the Jewish people. Because there always would be, even when you're shown you're wrong, but you haven't undone that hatred and jealousy. It doesn't go away. The Zohar says on these words, he says at the time that Yosef could not hold himself back anymore. He couldn't hold himself back because he realized it was going to be a civil war now. People were going to die already. He couldn't hold himself back anymore. And he felt he had to reveal himself to the brothers. So the Zohar says, Hoyatzar b'shamayim, there was great pains in the heavens. That Yosef couldn't hold himself back anymore. Why? Because once he has to reveal himself, what do you mean, what's the pain? Because he realized that things were never going to be the same. Things never got corrected. The facade looked okay, but never really fixed things up. And the truth is, this is something that the Jews never recovered from this era. This is one of the great tragedies of the book of Bereshis. After all is said and done, and look, you'll see this, it constantly happens. And then he brings Yaakov in. He takes care of the brothers. He feeds them. He gives them a separate place in Egypt. They're in Goshen. And they're thriving. And he takes care of every single need that they have. Mamish, unbelievable. For 17 years while Yaakov is still alive, they're all living in Egypt. He's treating them like kings. And then what happens after Yaakov dies, and Yosef gets special permission to bury, because they probably wouldn't let Yosef leave. He gets special permission, a special royal entourage. We're going to bury Yaakov back in Hebron. And there's thousands of troops. It's mamish the biggest funeral in history. And as they're coming back to Eretz Yisrael, Yosef says, I'd like to stop. And it is out of the way. It is. Remember, Egypt is southeast, Israel is northwest. Egypt is southwest, Egypt is northeast. Let me say it properly. Egypt is southwest, Israel is northeast, right? So you're going this way. Okay? If you're going to Hebron, you're over here. Shechem is up here. Okay? So this is how the funeral entourage went, like a Zoe. Stopping in Shechem, and then would come back up here. So what's going on? Yosef went to Shechem because he wanted to bless God for doing a miracle that he survived. When you go to a place where a miracle happens, he was supposed to get killed. He's only got a very short trip in Israel. They're not going to... So the Egyptians don't know the land, so okay, he'll take a detour. He goes past there. He says, okay, we'll stop it. And the brother thinks, he's trying to remember the past. Whoa, he's going to let us have it. And then they finally bury Yaakov. And then come at the end of the Torah, at the end of the Parsha, the brothers throw themselves before him. Says, please don't kill us. Please don't kill us. Because we knew, just like Esau. He said, I'll wait till my father dies. Then I'll kill Yaakov. So you're waiting for him to die, and I go, please. And then they lie and say, and our father said don't kill us. It never happened. So you can imagine then Yosef, he says, how could you say such a thing? How could you say such a thing? This is real people. Real people. Still couldn't get over it. Now, everything's on the level. I don't want to put them down as being such terrible people, but these are great people. But even at the end of the day, it's still they weren't brought back together. And then you wonder what happens. And then years later, this sin has to be dealt with. This sin has to be dealt with. And how is it dealt with? Unfortunately, during the Roman Empire, after the Second Temple was destroyed, then God has to pick 10 righteous tzaddikim, like Rabbi Akiva and his friends. And the Roman emperor calls these 10 in and tells them the story of Yosef and the brothers. He says, what should be, before he says, what should be the punishment if somebody sells somebody, kidnaps him and sells him, what should be the punishment? He says, it should be death. He says, well, it says in your Torah that 9 brothers sold a brother. So, and I find no one is righteous in the Jewish history as you people, and they never paid it, so you're going to pay it. So that's all what comes around goes around. What comes around goes around. And because they couldn't see the measure for measure. So it's really fantastic messages, especially, this time of year. It's a dark time of year. It's the deepest of depths of the winter, the darkest of the dark, which means there's so much light that's there that we don't see. So, Hashem should help us that we should recognize the tremendous barriers of jealousy and hatred that can be created within ourselves that blind us from the truth. And there's a lot more to talk about, it's too late, and all the inconsistent behavior that comes out of what we do. And a lot of times, we could be jealous of people, and then the things we do just don't make any sense. And if we could dig a little deeper, some of the behavior we do could be explained by that jealousy. So Hashem should help us in all our relationships. In all our relationships, there's always somebody who we're jealous of. There's always somebody who we're not getting along with totally. And it could very well be that, and then when we look at them, we do certain things we shouldn't do. And then when Hashem tries to correct things for us, so, I know what I'm doing wrong. God forbid, God brings terrible things to this world. To wake us up. He sometimes has to do very terrible things because we don't listen very well. And God forbid, Hashem has to give us very, very, very difficult things. And we look for an easy solution. I think if I go to the mystic and they give me a red thread, I think if I'll say 10 Psalms, that will do it. I think if I pray at this person's grave, and maybe if I give, some money to tzedakah, and if you go to the kotel 40 days in a row, your prayers will be answered. All these other narishkeiten. And I'm not against these, all wonderful things, but if you think that's going to change you're making a big mistake. When you're confronted with challenges, God is saying there's something wrong in your world. And you know what? To get out of it is going to be very hard. You know how hard it is? There were 9 great tzaddikim who couldn't do it. So I'm going to write it in the Torah, and you'll see how foolish they looked. From the outside looking in, you see how foolish they look. But from the inside, they thought they were totally righteous. How they could, after 17 years, think that Yosef wanted to kill them. You know what that meant? You know what that meant? You know what that's saying to Yosef? That means the last 17 years we were smiling at you. We hated your guts. Nothing personal, but we just think you're like Yosef. Now, how can they continue after that? How can they continue after that? How can life continue after that? If they only would have said, you know what, we were jealous of you, and we had the wrong attitude to you, and we're sorry. Did they ever bother saying that? Did they ever bother saying they're sorry? And they never bothered saying sorry, and Yossi therefore couldn't say, I forgive you. So not only were they punished, but Yosef got punished, because remember, 10 people were killed later on. 10 haruge malchus. But wait a minute, only 9 people sold him. Only 9 people sold him. Should have been 9 people got killed. So was the 10. The 10 was for Yosef too. Yosef too, as much as he tried, but you know what? Maybe he could have tried better too. At the end of the day, if you don't really make the changes, you destroy yourselves. And you bring this upon us. Hashem should help us that in the schus of these parshas and seeing how other people look so foolish, maybe we should all, me included, look at ourselves how foolish we are and how we don't want to admit the truth so easily. And how much more does Hashem have to remind us? If we love ourselves and we love our friends, we'll do the work so Hashem won't have to do it for us. So have a freilich hanuka.